everybody! Welcome to another MoGraph podcast. I'm Matt. Joining me this week is our good friend, Mr. Kyle Hamrick. How are you, sir?
Hey, that's me.
That
I'm
is
good.
you.
Yeah. What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. It's like we scheduled it or something.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Big shout out to our sponsor Otoy for sponsoring the podcast and being our universal sponsor for the podcast and the website. You know them, you love them. They're the makers of Octane Render and the Render Network. With Octane, you can create super photorealistic renders incredibly fast, and for those renders, you need an extra push of power. The Render Network has you covered. Render Network allows you to render your Octane, Redshift, and now Blender Cycles frames in a fraction of the time and a fraction of the cost of other cloud rendering services. Give them a big shout out. If you see anyone from Otoy, give them a big hug and say thanks for sponsoring the MoGraph podcast and everything that MoGraph does. Cool. We've got Kyle here this week. We're going to talk all things After Effects, all things, motion design hotline. It'll probably be an After Effects heavy because Kyle, how long have you been in After Effects?
I think I'm over 20 at this point.
Yeah. So that's
Seconds.
Good. I'm not the only one.
Yeah. No, I'm old. I've been using After Effects in some form since I want to say like 2003, 2004.
Same.
I don't know, something like that.
Version 3, I think, was my first one. But yeah, I've been using it. Basically, I started college in 2003, and then I had been using Premiere before that, like in high school. I started using it in 2003, and it's been a whirlwind since.
I think that's about when I discovered motion graphics, whichever, a friend of mine showed me some stuff from MK12.
It's always MK12.
It is.
Our generation is MK12.
I'm from Kansas City, and so not only was it like, wow, this stuff is amazing, but like, whoa, that's from like a mile from here.
Right.
And so particularly at the time, like, wow, you can do that stuff, period, but you can do that stuff here and not be in LA or not be in New York. And that was sort of a mind-blowing thing. So
one of my favorite stories, speaking MK12. So James Ramirez, James Ramirez? Yep. So James
We've
Ramirez.
actually never met in person. But...
Okay. So we had him on the podcast years and years ago to talk about the Spider-Man post or the credits, animations that he did for Spider-Man, and we're talking, and it was like, oh, I didn't realize you worked at MK12, blah blah blah. And I was talking about how like a huge inspiration for getting into motion design and stuff was the scene from Stranger Than Fiction.
Right.
Was like the brushing of the teeth and like the tie, and I was like, that was incredible. He goes, oh dude, that was my shot. I'm like, blowing my mind, because it's like literally the inspiration for me going into this industry was we were interviewing. It was so
and
cool.
The thing that was then referenced in every mood board for like 10 years.
It's true. It's so funny. Yeah, like I have been doing this for over 20 years or whatever. I'm filling out applications. So, as people know, as I talk about on the podcast, I've been looking for a full-time job. I'd love to move over to full-time employment. So if anybody's looking for, a very handsome motion designer, who doesn't look like any other motion designer,
right.
Please hire me. But so I've been, filling out resumes online and stuff like that. And it's like, but I come into the issue a lot where it's like, hey, how much After Effects experience? Well, I've got 20 years after experience. Oh, you're overqualified for this. And it's like, oh, come on. Yeah. I'm willing to work for your salary that you posted. Just like hire me. I just love motion design.
You're just too good, Matt.
Too good.
Sorry. Yep.
I'm too good. I don't know. So 20 years. You're also certified Adobe instructor, right?
Yeah, though
What?
technically that's just for video because there's no instructor exam for After Effects specifically.
Okay.
You're free to logic that out. There's like different, you could have like a user certification for After Effects, but not an instructor one. I think just no one's
Interesting.
bothered to make it. I don't
Yeah.
know. Um,
Has that
so,
helped out in your career at all? Curious.
um, you know, I personally, I have been teaching this stuff for maybe 12 years at this point in some form, maybe longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's that weird blip period that makes it very hard to estimate
Yeah.
time. But um, and honestly, I only got that more recently because it was advantageous for something when I was at School of Motion.
Okay.
Um, but it never really came up. It does, it certainly has meaning in some contexts. And like when I am filling out my little speaker bio for Adobe Max or
Yeah.
something, I think it, probably gets 5 more people to sign up for my sessions.
Nice.
But I, I don't know. I don't necessarily see it in my everyday life.
Yeah.
But you know,
What is your day to day? Because
yeah,
I think I run into this issue as well, where it's like people see me, anything I post, it's like, oh, I spoke here or I did this, or it's never really about the work that I do.
right.
What does your day to day consist of?
Yeah, well, it varies a lot, I think. So it's a good question, and I don't always know. Um, right, I'll say so. Right now, I'm currently working on a series of spots for a well-known client, but honestly, the spots are like pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely not. I'm not breaking a sweat on them.
Mm-hmm.
But they are being versioned into several different languages and stuff. So, there's a lot of knowledge required to do this smoothly. Meanwhile, let's see, looking at my list of things I've done this week, um, I submitted an outline for something I'm speaking at this summer.
Cool.
I've got a similar thing for another thing that I'm speaking at also this summer that I need to like finish that handout. Um, Working on some Mogerts for a client
Cool.
that I sort of maintain their stuff constantly. Um, gosh, had like a post-mortem meeting about a big project that I did a handful of weeks ago that only involved a minor international incident that I may
I
be
remember you mentioning that.
partially
Yeah.
responsible for. Um, I helped cause, but I would not say I'm responsible for.
Sure.
Let's parse
Yeah,
it that way.
don't put that out into the ether.
Right. It did an episode of Hotline yesterday at our not normal time because there was a product launch that bumped the schedule around. So
Right.
I don't know, whatever that is. I use After Effects and I talk about After Effects and other Adobe products. And yeah, as I mentioned pre-show, like last week, I was on a panel at my college for like alumni and creative careers. I don't know. I make stuff and I talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like
How
that's such a meaningless statement, but
how do you market yourself as a motion designer and not like an entertainer, or a
yeah,
teacher? You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. Um, and I've been somewhat jokingly using the title of edutainer, I think.
I like
Um,
that. I like that. Yeah.
because
Okay.
yeah, I try to obviously like I do some stuff that's more straightforward educational, but even in that I try to be I don't know, try to have a personality.
Mm-hmm.
But for folks who have never watched Motion Design Hotline, the show I do with Evan Abrams on Adobe Live weekly-ish, I mean, ultimately, it's just two friends hanging out, and we talk about After Effects a lot, and you'll learn stuff. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the dynamic of the two of us that is,
For sure. Yeah.
that. Um, how do I market myself as a motion designer? Honestly, I kind of don't. I should
That's nice.
probably.
Yeah.
It is. I have just enough stuff that falls into my lap that I am still meaning to make my updated reel, and just haven't gotten there. And I don't mean that to sound, I know there's a lot of folks that are looking for work right now, and I don't mean to be insensitive about that. Uh, but yeah, that's just my reality. I don't really. I've been building a network for
Yeah.
10 or 15 years, and that works.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my answer, is having people know that I am good at specific things, especially like things that require building systems
Mm-hmm.
around projects, and more technically leaning things. And so that I guess.
So when you were starting in your networking and building, your network of people,
Hmm.
was that before you were doing some of the education stuff? Because
Yeah.
I was thinking about it when you were talking about that, and I was like, well, I really didn't start like really connecting with the motion design industry and stuff until I kind of had a platform to speak on. And
Hmm.
so that could have been my downfall, that people knew me as this thing instead of something else, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that kind of the same for me. I definitely feel like I toiled away in obscurity for many years,
Mm-hmm.
um, which in retrospect, was me learning how to work through projects and work with clients and adapt to things, and, all the things that turned out to be very valuable. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely for a while there, I just kind of felt like I was making, okay stuff, and probably not charging nearly enough for it,
Sure.
and learning a lot of hard
Hey,
lessons in the process.
that's my current
Uh-huh.
deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but I sort of stumbled into teaching and presenting and building community and whatever other things you want to kind of wrap into that. Um, and I think it happened to coincide with a couple of conferences coming into being, and I went to those, and I, was brave enough to talk to people there,
Mm-hmm.
and just sort of started a ball rolling. And um, I never remember. I credit Peter Quinn with it, but it may have been Mikey Borup. I don't remember. Um, but after, I'll say, the second instance of one of these After Effects World conferences
Mm-hmm.
that started a little over more than 10 years ago, I was hanging out with some of the other speakers and Adobe folks, and someone was like, "You should probably present." And I was like, "Oh, no, no." And then, I thought about it for a while, and I was like, "Well, what do I have to lose?" I was already doing some teaching at that point, and so I submitted some stuff, and here we are.
Yeah. Now, have you always been motion focused, because the thing with After Effects is it's a beast. There is
Yeah,
so many different directions you can go in After
right.
Effects. Like, I spent a good majority of my early career doing like compositing
Yep.
in After Effects and motion tracking and like removing people's heads and sticking other people's heads on there, which I
Hmm.
still do a lot of work nowadays. Like, that's the easy stuff to me, you
Right.
know? But has your focus always been motion, or did you ever diverge into some of those other fields or
Yeah, so I
areas?
started as a video editor,
Okay.
and I still
Same.
market myself as an editor
Uh-huh.
as well. I mean, I do typically, it kind of depends on where I'm, the audience that I'm talking to, as far as whether I make that like a prominent part of my title, and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what my title even is without it being 5 sentences is its own
Yeah.
battle. But um, I I mean, I spend a ton of time in Premiere. I edit. I think I work with an editing mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I use Premiere as part of After Effects, basically. Like, often I'll just use it as a clipboard,
Uh-huh.
um, because you can literally copy paste clips between the two, by the
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of stuff like that that I think informs the way that I work. And I also started out very much in compositing and stuff like that, because I think also at the time, like, motion design was still a pretty nebulous and new concept. And so a
Yeah.
lot of us were, quote, After Effects guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then that later kind of became, I don't know, actually meant something. And now, I spent most of my time like making a ball move around the screen, as we do, to be
Right.
whatever metaphor we're getting paid to visualize. But yeah, I mean, I kind of do all of it. After Effects is a Swiss Army knife. I think I'm kind of a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
So we're friends.
I anytime someone asks me what I do, I like to say position, scale, rotation, transparency. That's like 90% of my job.
Yeah,
It's just those
yeah.
right there.
Yeah. And I mean, I try to point that out to folks when they're learning this stuff too. We're going to do some basics here, and we're going to move on to a bunch of fancy stuff too. But honestly, the stuff I'm going to teach you in the first lesson, it's going to be about 90% of
Yeah.
what you do if this becomes your career.
Yeah.
So pay attention and do that stuff well.
Yeah. And you're just mostly 2D, right? You haven't dove into the 3D world or anything. Although Adobe's new 3D objects are like the whole new 3D workflow is
it's pretty good.
It's pretty incredible.
I dip my toe into 3D a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And like I got my money's worth out of Element 3D
Yeah.
a million times over, for example.
I've seen the new version like 4 or 5 years ago. I hear it's still coming out.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. No shade on Kramer. I mean,
yeah.
He deserves a break. Yeah, I mean, I have always done a lot of 3D in After Effects.
Mm-hmm.
Even there are several things that I have built in there that probably would have been much easier in a 3D app. I've done some bonkers stuff in there.
A rotating cube or something. I've seen people do that, and I'm just like, oh boy, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wish it was something that simple. I've done like full 3D worlds in there made up of flat planes and all kinds of bonkers nonsense. Stringing 4 instances of element together to make things. So I do know cinema a little bit, but I'm not strong enough in there to make that my primary thing.
It's just position, scale, rotation.
Yeah. I can model things that are basic. Most of the time, I'll purchase models, and I know how to slap, move textures around and stuff like that. But most of the time, I'm just, I just need a thing that I can bring into After Effects and turn it around, or move it around to interact with 2D elements. But I do like the new system in there quite a bit, and the fact that you can bring in animated models and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it opens up a lot. I've been using that quite a bit and trying to help hype it so that other people use it.
Yeah.
But
have you dove into the Substance workflow or anything at all?
Yeah, I've been poking all of those apps a fair amount, and they're really neat. There's definitely aspects of them, like, it's a bummer that there is currently no way to animate anything in 3D, like for real.
Yeah.
You can kind of make 3D pieces and then export them in strategic pieces so that then you could animate them in After Effects, but certainly that has a ceiling. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to sort of seeing where that continues to go, but also, I mean, there's no reason for them to develop a full 3D app because Cinema exists and Blender exists, and that would be a little, I don't know, seems like a foolish allocation of resources.
Yeah, I think I really enjoy the addition of the 3D stuff that they're doing, especially like with the shadow catchers and stuff like that. Being able to bring in HDRIs was a big thing. I think that's fantastic because so I do a lot of work for a YouTuber called David Lopez. He was a big Vine guy for a while, and then so he'll send me stuff that I think some of his editors are like, no, just send that to Matt. That's I can't quite handle that, So a lot of it is like character work, but I'll hop into Mixamo for most of it. I'll find a model, bring that model into Mixamo, and then I'll just mix and match the character animations in Cinema. But a good majority of that work with this new workflow in 3D After Effects could be done solely in After Effects, because I'll motion track the scene, bring that scene, that motion track scene, into Cinema, then take my 3D character, put them in the scene, and then bring it back out or render it back out. And it's like, if I could skip that entire first, or that middleman just to work solely in After Effects would be fantastic.
Yeah,
So.
it definitely is. I've never been, I've done it a few times, but I've never been like primarily working where I'm building a bunch of stuff in 3D and then using After Effects only for that comp.
Yeah.
But I do imagine that if that workflow is a thing that you do a lot, it has to really open up a lot. Even if you were like, let's be realistic here. The advanced render in After Effects, like, it's not going to reach the look that you can get from a dedicated 3D render, and they're not trying to. But if you're just doing product shots and you just need a thing to, come up and do this, like, you can make it look pretty good. Right over there. That's one of my many little desk knickknacks. From Half Res, for anyone who doesn't know,
it's a Wacom pen holder.
Yep. Yeah. Ding. So, it's really good for that. And honestly, if I could see a world where I would even use it as, getting it most of the way there, even if I was going to finalize that render in a 3D app. But that way you could really dial in the exact angle and do all your shadows and do a lot of that kind of stuff where it's probably faster and easier. And then if you really need, the thing needs to be super shiny or whatever the aspects that After Effects is just not going to be able to touch, then, you can augment that. But for a lot of stuff, it's great.
I think the biggest thing, or the biggest hurdle that Adobe probably has with like normal everyday After Effects users hopping over to any sort of like 3D stuff, is going to be the implementation of materials. Like, that's what I can see. Like, because with Substance, they're asking for an additional, license or an additional subscription in order to be able to do that. And so I worry, though, that eventually they're going to pigeonhole themselves, because being able to build materials and stuff, like, I think you can do very basic materials, but not ones that are gonna kind of like blow you away or whatever. Like, I think that's gonna be that should be a focus, or like a light version of Substance or something that can just pop up and it's like, hey, let me do like a material editor, or something.
I agree. I mean, I think at a minimum, and technically you could do this right now if you're very clever about it, but it's not really workable. But even at a basic version, the thing that we all used Element 3D for years, which was you bring up the phone and then you stick a comp into, the screen is the phone, so that you can animate that and then you zoom into it or whatever. I think something like that is kind of the minimum that it needs to have to really be able to be a daily driver. There's a lot of stuff that it does well right now, and if you're just doing a product promo, or I think in a lot of cases you can believably comp something into a shot. Probably if it's not the hero most of the time, or, if you're okay with it being a little bit unrealistic. But I mean, you could 100%, stick a car driving in the background and have it sell.
100%. I saw a big transition, like, have you ever seen presentations like at NAB or Adobe Max or something where it's like, okay, that just changed the course of the trajectory of my career. That moment for me was what's his name? Oh, he's a director. He did Star Wars and Monsters and
Gareth Edwards.
Gareth Edwards, yes. Gareth Edwards spoke at NAB for Adobe, and there was maybe 5 people in the audience. So me and a buddy were walking by, and he's like, "Oh, I watched Monster. Let's sit down on his presentation." And he was showing off all the things, the ways he was using After Effects and like 3ds Max or something, or like comping things, or like green screening video of people running against, on a treadmill and stuff like that, in order to create these massive scenes for like a BBC documentary or whatever. And it's like, that just blew my mind, how much was involved, and or how far you could get with so little. Like you're talking about, oh yeah, it's going to be great for just putting little elements in the background and stuff like that. I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I'm kind of jealous. I wish I was at that.
That was like
presentation.
It's pretty insane to think like how far that guy has gone in his career.
Yeah.
And I was literally sitting in an audience of 5 people. Like,
what year was this?
Oh, it was years and years ago. It was before they had the big stage. Like it was probably 2 years, before, and it was just a little stage, but man, it was pretty awesome. That was pretty great.
It looks like we have someone in the chat who worked on Monsters.
That's fun.
Apparently, which I'm kind of jealous of that too.
I know. It was such a small little production or whatever, and like apparently a lot of the post work was just motion tracking signs and like changing them out and stuff like that, which was cool.
Makes me want to watch that again. It's been quite a few years.
Yeah. So, talk to me about Motion Design Hotline.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Motion Design Hotline is Evan Abrams and I. I'm sure a lot of you know Evan's name. He's been doing After Effects tutorials for maybe 15 years at this point. I don't know. He and I met a handful of years ago, many years ago at this point. Whatever we say at this point, at NAB actually. I think that we originally were chatting about wanting to like make animations for D&D stuff in After Effects. Because we're all nerds of various types. And somehow
you've seen my business card, right?
Oh, I did.
Yes.
It's excellent. I've got it right here, actually.
Nice. One of your fidgets on your desk. Yeah.
I don't know if I can get it. I probably can't get it to focus. There we go.
Yeah.
Somehow that turned into us doing a After Effects teaching silly live stream thing. We did it for about a year and a half, just totally independent on our own. And then when I went on staff for School of Motion in 2020, we stopped doing that because I was going to be doing a lot of live streaming for them, and that seemed like it would be, confusing. And so then after I left School of Motion in 2022, early 2023, I don't know, then it happened to just line up perfectly where Evan had been doing other Adobe Live stuff in the interim. And so we hopped it over to Adobe Live and have been doing it weekly-ish ever since then. So we mostly talk about After Effects, but we'll touch, anything that could possibly feed into After Effects, which is basically every other Adobe product.
Yeah.
And we've touched all of them at some point.
How did y'all get the hookup with Adobe? Like, as far as like being on Adobe Live every week, that's awesome.
Yeah. No complaints here.
Yeah.
I mean, he had been doing that for a bit, just doing like chill solo streams and things like that. Obviously, I had a variety of Adobe connections from speaking and conferences and having, met a lot of the After Effects team. Not that they're involved with Adobe Live at all, but I think it just helped having a lot of that stuff and kind of having that visibility already.
Sure.
Probably made it an easier sell. So, ultimately, I don't know if I have a good answer. So somehow it happened, and now it's happening.
How long were you working for School of Motion, and what were you doing over there?
Yeah, about 2 years, and I kind of got hired to be me, whatever that means.
That's
Doing
nice.
so I was running their live streaming. We had a couple different live stream shows that we did as part of that, where we were focusing on um, specific people in the industry, doing sort of an interview style, kind of like this. Um, had a show that was sort of more technically focused. We did various sort of community focused things. We did things that were both publicly facing and sort of inward facing. That was around the same time that they had moved away from Facebook and onto a different platform. So we
Yeah.
were trying to hype that up and help get that going. And other stuff like I worked with Ryan Plummer to sort of relaunch an idea that he had done called 15-minute MoGraph, which was basically like, here's some prompts just to like keep people, take 15 minutes and make something with this prompt.
Yeah.
So we did sort of like a very intentional campaign of those for a while, and did some sort of inward facing live streams around those and like featuring students and alumni and stuff who'd made something interesting. Um, so a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I eventually became one of the creative directors there. And so I was also doing a lot of sort of supervising courses being created and tutorials being created and trying to help onboard people to make tutorials and help give them advice for how to make better tutorials. And I don't know, like 30 other things too, which is kind of, me being
Yeah.
Mr. Swiss Army knife, I guess. So
Yeah. That's all over the place. And doing motion
Yep.
design at the same time.
Trying to, yeah.
Yeah.
I found that most of what I was doing while I was there was making, most of what I was actually creating were like examples for tutorials that I was making. I definitely didn't feel like I was making real stuff as often, which was one of my reasons for stepping away, because I felt like I could feel like myself getting just a little bit blurry around the edges on some of my deeper technical knowledge, which so
how deep how deep into After Effects are you? Like, are you digging deep into like expressions and stuff like that?
very so earlier in January, I think, of this year, Nick Dean and I put out an hour-long tutorial that we collaborated on that dives super deep into the text style expressions, which were fairly recently revised to give you specific ranges so that you could basically override what happens in the character panel by calling out to those text styles, so that you could like one of the easiest use cases is like so that you could highlight a specific word in a different typeface.
Okay.
But you could then systematize that and like give those controls to a user as part of a template or something.
Okay.
Which previously you could only do by using multiple layers and kind of hacking things together, and then the spacing is never right. But you can do all that with expressions. But they're like expressions that are like 25 lines long.
Yeah.
So that, but also to answer your question, I have on many occasions talked someone through a question like over the phone by closing my eyes and navigating them through the After Effects menus.
I can run After Effects. It's like the Matrix, dude. That's funny.
Yep. I know it pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't pretend that I know absolutely everything in there. It's a big program, and there's probably stuff in there that no one fully understands. But I know a lot of it pretty well.
I have only gotten so deep into expressions. I feel like that is probably my least strong area. Is that, and that's only because I never really have needed it that often. But it's amazing how deep you can get with it, like I at one point, like my first experience with expressions, so I have a very small programming background. I took maybe 1 or 2 programming classes, like just simple C++. I didn't do well in either of them because my teachers were so heavily accented. I had a really hard time following the concepts, and I was also at night after working a full day, so I was just
Right.
exhausted by the end of it. But yeah, so the first thing I created was I was able to take like an audio file, and I've done this multiple times where you convert the audio file into keyframes, and then I would write an expression for 5 different like mouth movements and like change it the opacity based off of like if it's in this level or in this level. So throughout the animation, you'd see the mouth move, based off of like how loud or whatever it is. It was really cool. And then recently we did a live stream. It was a few weeks ago where me and Matthew in the chat, we were on Discord and we were talking about how basically updating your composition based off of a CSV file, and building out your text based off of a CSV.
Yep.
So I built this whole template, which you can go to mattmilstead.mograph.com and download the project file for free on my MoGraph page, where you can basically take a CSV and every single line have a different person or have a different like subtitle. And as you change the composition, it would basically reference the composition to be that line. So if the name of the composition was 001, it would reference 01. And it's crazy how like intricate that is.
It can be very much so. I think a lot of people are intimidated by expressions, but the vast majority of what you end up doing with them, I do a lot of template building and stuff, so I do get pretty deep. But even that, most of the time you're just linking things, and sometimes with a modifier. Like I obviously teach about expressions pretty frequently. I just did at NAB, and one of the things that I try to help people understand is like, yes, you can write things that are 20 lines deep, and that has a purpose, but most of the time you're going to be writing things that are like 2 lines, and it's just, hey, link to this and do that times 10. Or basic conditionals like, if this thing happens, then you're going to be on, otherwise be off. And a lot of it's much more about that kind of like logical thinking than it is knowing the super intricate code. One of the examples that I really love showing, because I think it's a good light bulb moment for a lot of people, and I do legitimately use this almost every day. Okay, so how often have you made a thing where you've animated something from 0 to 100, but with a little bit of overshoot? So it goes boom, and then it sits there for a minute, and then it goes boom and goes back off, right?
Yeah.
And then your client says, hey, I want that to be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, or you want to do that.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, well, now I have to grab all of these keyframes and try to adjust that, or like adjust the math so that it's still 8% more than it was, or yada, yada,
and you
yada.
don't want to scale up the maximum size with all of them highlighted, because then the minimum goes negative. And
Right, exactly. It's a pain in the butt. Or what you could do is just add a slider to that layer and then link your scale to that thing. Do value times that thing, but divided by 100, so that you can still have it be 0 to 100, because otherwise it'd be 0 to 1, which is not fun to work with. So now you just gave yourself an extra scale control. Your keyframes all still work. Everything that you did still works, but now it's relative to this other little slider controls that you built. So you could adjust it to 83.2%, so it looks right, but it still does the exact same little pop-on animation you already built. And that's the kind of stuff that, like, you build it once, you can save it as an animation preset, so you can easily apply it anytime you want in the future. And you could write it as 1 line if you wanted to. I would probably typically write it as 2, just for human readability. But it doesn't have to be complex. It's just a little thing that helps you work more easily. And then that sort of thing, if you need to do a project where you're like swapping out photos and something, and they haven't been batch processed so they're all the same size, that's a great use case for that, because now you have an adjuster to get that photo to be exactly the size that it needs to look right, but any other keyframes or adjustments that you already had on the thing don't get messed with.
Yeah.
And you can do that, times 20 or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I think recently I also
yeah,
built out another one that would read the X scale and the Y scale, figure out which one was bigger in proportion to like a 16:9 and automatically rescale it based off of that. Because back in the day, I did a lot of funeral collages where it would be like, fade from one picture to the next. And the old boss who I worked for, he was like, hey, is there a way to automate this? And I was like, yes.
Yep.
So I built out like it's 200 or 300 pictures of just like basic generic pictures. And I said, you rename all of these, rename all of them into the order that it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. And it will automatically update.
Yep. And then you could use linear to make it so that all of them auto fade and, auto scale by 5% or whatever it is, based on their in and out points. Like that's the kind of stuff where you can work smart and, maybe, I know how to write all this stuff from scratch now, but there were certainly many years where I was mostly just copy pasting from Creative Cow posts by Dan Eberts.
Yeah.
You figure out a way to do it easier, and so you're not wasting your time making the same thing 50 times.
Yeah.
To talk to your CSV driven project that you were talking about, I've done a lot of that kind of stuff. One of the things I did recently, we had about 5,000 deliverables because it was a very large project, a bunch of different looks times about 12 different screens times 200 athletes in both singles and pairs. Jeez. And so I built templates that would work for both singles and pairs. And if there was no second name, it would adapt and move stuff up. And then you could just feed it all from this one spreadsheet.
And were you doing it? Were you then exporting those as Mogerts, or were you actually setting those up as compositions and then rendering them out? Wow.
Yep.
See, that's where I think it's like super powerful, because if you actually have to render out all those things on alpha and stuff, like building a Mogert is fine, but being able to like actually have all those files is much more helpful.
Yeah. It's all about what the use case is. And even with Mogerts, I think, you can make them pretty simple. But if you want to make a really good one that does exactly what the team needs it to do, there's a lot of trying to extract information about like, well, I'm going to need to build this in a particular way. So let's figure out exactly how you want it to work. Because if we're doing all this kind of dynamic resizing and, if you're only entering a thing here, then this other thing won't even appear. And, we can create all these rules, but getting people to think through that before the thing even exists can be sort of a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Have Gustav in the chat was saying that he's been using ChatGPT to help with a lot with expressions. Have you messed around with that?
I have not. So I have some thoughts.
I know it already. I don't need.
Well, I mean, I do. So I am of. Here's my thought about using ChatGPT for expressions. I think if you have sort of a base for understanding already, that can be a good strategy, because you are now equipped with some tools to fix when it inevitably gives you incorrect information.
Yes.
But when you go on the After Effects Reddit and people are like, how do I this? And someone says, just ChatGPT, bro. And it's like the person asking this question has
sounded just like a Redditor, by the way.
Yeah. Clearly has no understanding of what we're even talking about. So if they go and ask ChatGPT how to do the thing, you're asking it to write you a novel in a language that you don't read. And so then you have no ability to assess that or change it or anything. And so you're just going to be hammering away at the slot machine that you probably don't even know how to ask it the correct question.
Yes.
And so I think that's a very bad suggestion for people who don't understand quite what they're doing. But if you have, you're like, okay, I understand the basics, but I don't know how to write super complex stuff. then yeah, it does have a lot of value as like a coding helper, and can help you figure out like those bits that you can't quite dial in.
Yeah.
Though I will point out, there are 20 some years of Dan Ebert's posts that are all still up and still just as valid. And you can probably answer it that way too.
Now, and answer me this, because did they change what it was based off of? So
in
like
2018,
okay,
yes,
yeah.
there's a new, more modernized expression engine. And so there were some things, basically it enabled new stuff. And then some of what it changed, probably the only place the average person would see this is in an if else expression.
Okay.
And technically it was just that you couldn't be as sloppy as you previously could be.
Okay.
But that's where most people would see it. If you were opening up an older project or something like that, if else's might tend to break because a lot of them were written in kind of a sloppier way that it just didn't allow for anymore.
Is it more
based gotta use
off
curly
of
braces now.
Java or something?
Yeah.
Okay. Because, and see, this is an issue that I ran into with ChatGPT, and it, like Gustav was saying in the chat, he said, yeah, I only know enough expression knowledge to get myself in trouble. It's like that little bit of programming background that I had, you know, understanding like, okay, let's read through this and see what we're saying, you know, like that helped me with some of the ChatGPT expressions that I've used. It's like, okay, I know what you're doing wrong. But that was another thing that ChatGPT did, was it was giving me like Java versions or non-Java versions, and it's like these could have been truncated years ago, you know, and you just don't know that if you don't have that background.
True. I will say, since we're talking about it, if you ever if you're doing a tutorial that was made since 2018 and something isn't working the way that it is in the tutorial, go up to File. Here, I'm doing it. Project Settings, I want to say, and look under Expressions. There's a little tab for Expressions. Make sure that your menu is set to the JavaScript and not the legacy, because that setting is a bit sticky. And if you opened up a really old project, it would have been in the legacy engine, and then that might stick. And so then a newer function like repeat that you can put in source text, for example, does not exist. And so it'll throw an error instead. So there's your troubleshooting moment.
Yeah. I don't know when they also added because I've been using them, you know, I do love, so this was, I think, a holdover from, or very similar thought process to Adobe Flash. I'm not sure if you ever used Adobe Flash in the day, where you could do like, you know, click on the thing and then on click or on release or whatever. They've got some of those expressions in After Effects. I use the loop out one all the time, where it's just, you know, I don't want to type it out. I just do the drop down, loop out, you know, for everything. Which is a great introduction to expressions.
Flyouts.
Yeah.
I don't think those flyouts are particularly helpful, but they do have everything that you.
They don't tell you necessarily what they do unless you understand what they say. But I do get that. So
there are some good. Let's see. In case you're listening and you do want to get into expressions, I have some great recommendations for you. Ukramedia has some great stuff. School of Motion does have a very in-depth course called Expression Session. And then there's a channel on YouTube called Animoplex. And it's actually free. You can, you can give the guy like $10 or something if you want, which I highly recommend because it's excellent. And he explains a lot of those basic concepts. So those are good places to get started.
Honestly,
but also feel free to reach out to people and ask good questions, and other humans can often answer them for you too.
That's true. The number of times I've messed up and then gone on to the MoGraph Slack in the After Effects and say, what am I doing wrong? And then hit up by Michael Slabzapski. It's like, you're messing up here. Okay. Sorry.
But see, that's also, crucially, that's you making effort.
Yeah.
And then saying like, hey, I've been trying and I hit a wall.
Yeah.
Not just, oh, I want to do this thing and I don't know how.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to be trite about it, but like, I tried nothing and I'm all out of ideas.
Yeah.
And this whole industry is like, not so much now, but people of our vintage,
Mm-hmm.
we came from like, you had to explore and experiment and try stuff and figure it
Yeah.
out. Because we had to learn these programs from books.
Yeah.
And if you
The
weren't
amount
willing
of
to,
YouTube was not there. We had Andrew
yeah,
Kramer. That's why we all love him. Because
yeah,
he was the only one teaching us.
yeah, starting in what, 2009, in
Yeah.
like tiny little QuickTime
Yeah.
windows that were like 320 by 320. Yeah, like if you don't have the ability to even just use a search engine to ask good questions and find stuff, like the amount of information that exists on these programs and everything is staggering.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to look for it and put a little bit of effort into it. And maybe try for more than 10 seconds to answer your own questions. And if you run into a wall, that's okay. There's plenty of people who will happily answer it if you ask it in a good way and not just be lazy about it.
Yeah.
That's
Spent a lot of time on Reddit.
Well, I've been answering people's After Effects questions for well over a decade. And if you put effort into it, I will happily, like, I'll drop everything and I'll spend 30 minutes, like, giving you a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just say, how do I do this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Why don't you put a little bit of effort into it and find out? And then when you have a meaningful question, then we can start.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, it's a loaded question because After Effects, like we've said, is such a Swiss Army knife that
there's four different answers to your question.
There's four different ways to do the same thing too,
And what
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to tell you the way that I would do it because you're clearly 3 days into your motion design journey.
Yeah.
And that answer is not going to make sense to you yet.
And you just barely understand position, rotation, transparency,
right,
scale.
Exactly. So sorry to sound like a curmudgeon, but
hey, it comes with the 20 years of After Effects experience.
Yeah. Be curious, put effort into things, put effort into your questions, and they will reward you with good answers.
Yeah. And I've said this a few times over the past year. I've got to give Adobe a lot of props because I feel like, especially After Effects, the After Effects team, I feel like they've been listening a lot to,
I think so, yes.
They've been a lot more active and listening to the community and what they want, and implementing things and I'm pretty sure this is a lot has to do with the fact that I switched over to a Mac full time. Switched back from a PC to a Mac, but like After Effects has been so stable, like unbelievably stable in comparison to where it was years and years ago. Like I had a crash the other day and I was like, are you serious? This never happens anymore. I was very surprised by it, but yeah, the After Effects team has been doing great. And have you tried the new caching system?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, that's a great example of the kind of thing that longtime users will appreciate. New users honestly don't really even, the only way to explain it to someone who hasn't already been using After Effects would involve telling them like, well, it used to be worse, but now it's better.
Right.
and you don't even need to do that. Just like, it just works.
Yeah.
Okay. But in case you don't know what we're talking about, previously After Effects used only your RAM to build the previews, but now in the most current version, it can also use your hard drive space as that preview cache. And so you're not limited by your RAM. You do still want RAM so that you can, have more than one app open, so that you can load 3D models, things like that. But previously it would just fill up your RAM and that was the end of your preview. You could knock down your resolution, whatever. But one of the developers joked, like, we could probably lower the required specs for After Effects. I literally watched some of them at NAB doing this demo. They would go into the preferences menu and set it so that After Effects was only allocated 1 gig of RAM, and they were running After Effects just fine. And then they actually kept forgetting that they had done that because it was running fine. And then they'd go to load a 3D model or something and like, oh, there we go. That's the thing.
Yeah, I remember them doing that. That was pretty incredible. I'm still on an older version because I've been stuck on a project, but
Yeah.
I'm excited to get onto the new version.
I mean, you can have a bunch of them simultaneously.
A bunch of different versions. Yeah.
Yeah, main number versions at least. You can't have like 25.0 and 25.2
Yeah.
simultaneously, but
yeah.
Not anymore because I recently upgraded my machine, but I had like 6 versions of AE on my previous machine.
I probably still have 6 versions of AE and Photoshop. I'm using an older version. It just so happens that it's an older version, and now I've started getting the pop-up. Do you know the pop-up?
Yeah.
Oh, it's annoying. But the pop-up that says, "Oh, you're on an older version," blah blah blah. It's like, all right, fine, I'll upgrade. Yeah. All right, cool. Real quick, I've got a couple headlines. We got like 5 minutes left. I'll go through these headlines. Do the intro. First up is the RenderCon talk that I did with the Render Roundtable with Annabelle, Blake Catherine, Ren from Corridor, Alex Ness. They have posted that online, and there's also a bunch of other ones online as well. You can check those out at youtube.com/@RenderNetwork. I don't know when YouTube started doing the at their stuff. Like, you can go to youtube.com/Mograph and we're there. But anyway, at Render Network, and see a lot of the stuff. I recommend the Jules Urbach one because that one is fantastic. And then second up, Camograph tickets are still available. Yeah. I was talking to Dave earlier today, and because Campmograph has sold out so quickly every other year, it's like people are like, oh, I missed the cutoff, or I missed the date, I guess they're sold out, not realizing there are actually a few tickets left. So if you're interested in going to Camp Mograph this year, it's in Virginia Beach again. Virginia Beach was one of, if not the most beautiful place we've been. The camp there, which camp is that? Is it Camp Collins? I think. No. Camp.
Oh, what's it called?
It's not Camp Collins.
I don't remember.
Camp something. I don't know. It's not. I'm trying to remember. Camp Abnaki, Camp Cullen, Camp Collins, Camp Duncan.
It might be Duncan.
I don't.
Maybe.
No.
This is so important. We must know.
Camp Silver Beach.
Yes.
Yeah, duh.
Duncan was the one in outside Chicago.
Yeah. Camp Silver Beach. Camp Silver Beach is great, and the beach there is just fantastic. Being able to see the sunset, that sunset was just beautiful. And those cabins are great. There's bathrooms in there. It's going to be a really good time. And also they worked out, from what I hear, they've worked out the transportation stuff, so we don't have to have 6 of our people running transportation the whole time, which that was hectic. Luckily, we got a fantastic deal on all those vans that year. But yeah, camp tickets are still available. You can get those. Go to campmograph.com and you can find the link for the tickets. But
I'm hyped for that. I did not go to the previous Virginia Beach one.
Oh, you're gonna love.
So I'm really
this
looking forward to it.
Yeah. I like the layout of this camp a lot because you've got the cafeteria and then you've got this big wraparound porch where you can sit outside and eat if you want to, but literally connected to it is where the fireside chat is. Nice. So it's like the entire area right there is just like, it's where all the social stuff happens, which is great. And then a short little walk right to the beach. It's nice. So cool. Yeah, it's very, very cool. So make sure to check those out. And then, Kyle, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and as we both thought, this was pretty easy to fill up an hour.
I knew it would be. Where can people find you online? And also, where can people find Motion Design Hotline as well?
So if you're looking for me, you can find me at kylehamrick.com. Hamrick, the simplest version of Hamrick. You don't need to add any extra letters.
I was like, yes, it's exactly like it sounds.
Yep. You can find me on Instagram as Kylosaurus Rex. I'm on Blue Sky. Probably a few other places, not really anymore.
Got to get you on that Mograph.
Yep. Well, I have a profile. I just haven't put much into it.
That's fine.
Though I just now realized I'm not Kylosaurus Rex there. I should be.
Oh, you should be.
Yeah.
That's easy.
That's
you
my
just
thing.
go into your profile settings, and then
Oh,
we've
I
got
know, yeah.
display name, and that will be your display name. Yes.
I'm going to do it as
That
soon
was
as
one of
we
the first
wrap this up.
updates we made because everyone's like, why does this have my old forum name? But yeah.
And then if you're looking for Motion Design Hotline, you can find that at, surprisingly, motiondesignhotline.com.
Wow.
We have over 100 past episodes and free project files for most of them.
That's awesome.
You can also find, we do have some merch in case you are a fan of sort of modernized Memphis-y sort of whatever. I don't know. We have hats and shirts, and that's it. But it's fun. Watch old episodes and learn stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Cool. Thanks, man. Thanks for everyone for joining. Make sure to follow us on all the socials, especially YouTube and Twitch. We've been doing our weekly streams. We will not be streaming this week. I've had a family emergency, so I'm actually getting on a plane in about 3 hours. I'll be in London in case there's any London, mographers who want to meet up. I'll be down there. I'm going to the West Ham United game on Sunday. I'm very excited about that. I got actual tickets, not fake tickets this time.
There's a story.
Yeah. So I'll be there if anyone wants to meet up or hang out. That would be cool. But yeah, no live stream this week. And no podcast next week. We did originally have someone booked, but I rescheduled that. So anyway, 2 weeks from now, we'll have Alex Parker on. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
And so it'll be really cool. And then Elijah Sheffield, that's who we were supposed to have on next week. He'll be on the week after. For those who don't know, Elijah just did the Blender course for School of Motion, which is going to be really exciting to have. He's local Dallas. I didn't know that. So we've hung out a few times since, which is really cool. Make sure and check those out. Also, if you haven't done it already, make sure to sign up for your own MoGraph.com account. It's one-stop shop for everything a motion designer needs. You can showcase your demo reel, projects you've worked on, post jobs, apply for jobs, sell your digital goods, find meetup groups, or start one of your own, and so much more is planned. We just hit over 700 members, which is really exciting.
Nice.
I'll start getting them to be more active. I need all those people to be active. That's all right. Start posting
We need
theirs.
to commit.
Right. And remember, it's an artist first site, where your work will always be yours. We don't train it. We don't do algorithms. It's literally comes in and goes, in the order that you see it, which is fantastic. And we'll never feed it to the AI machine. So stop feeding Zuck's AI machine and stop posting on Instagram. Start posting on MoGraph.com. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So thanks again, everyone. Appreciate y'all being here. Until next time, I'm Matt, and you are?
I'm Kyle.
Yeah.
I didn't know if this was like a...
That's all right. You know what? I forgot to warn you
yourself.
about that because this is your first time on the show. Typically I say, yeah. Anyway, I'm Matt, and you are?
I'm Kyle.
Later, yo.
Pretty good, I guess.